afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Reh, and I'm a reader in European politics at UCL here in London. And it's my great pleasure to introduce three speakers. Robert Csehi, visiting professor at the Central European University in Budapest. Natasza, Styczyńska, associate professor at Jagiellonian University. And Petr Kaniok from Masaryk University, and they're going to give you the Hungarian, Polish, and Czech perspective on Brexit. Robert.
Okay, thanks very much. Let me start out with saying that Brexit is really of low salience in Hungary. I mean, it's not the most debated issue as you can think of in the country. In terms of, just to give you a sort of an economic perspective, even government assessment says that the UK leaving the EU would only have an impact of 0.3% of our GDP. So it's really considered to be, from an economic perspective, not that much of an importance. Also, on the other hand, the government is maintaining close coordination with UK companies in Hungary, so there's been lots of discussion between them, and the government also stressed many times that at the end of the day there should be a Brexit, if there's a Brexit, where UK companies should not be negatively affected by it in Hungary, mainly in terms of Hungarian employees in those UK companies. Now, taking a step back, what is the relationship and what is the approach of the government to Brexit? I would say it's a very ambivalent relationship. On the one hand, the government considers the UK, or considered the UK as an ally in its sort of fight or stand against centralization in Brussels within the EU. It always formulated and looked at the UK as an ally in criticizing Brussels and European institutions. And it used even the issue of Brexit to say, well, the European institutions are not paying attention to what member states want. Right after the referendum, this is what the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade said. Well, this is because the EU, you got the Brexit referendum and the results of the referendum because the EU is not paying attention to what member states really want. So in a sense, it's advancing, or the Brexit has been used to advance the government's, if you like, Euro-realist agenda in the domestic political discourse in Hungary. I mean, it has some sort of a history already built up, starting with discussions and debates about changing the constitutional framework in Hungary, other legal elements of the Hungarian legal system, which has been criticized by the European Commission and European institutions. So in that sense, Hungary is going to lose an ally in this fight against centralization in Brussels. At least to my understanding, this is the perception from the government. On the other hand, the relationship is not so friendly when it comes to, or not necessarily so friendly when it comes to Hungarians living in the UK and what kind of impact Brexit might have on them. I mean, the Hungarian government stressed it many times that Brexit should not have a negative impact on Hungarians obviously living and working in the UK. And as we move along the negotiation process, this has been stated more and more often, sort of making a requirement that there should be a reciprocity between the two countries, how they deal with their citizens in their own countries. Now, obviously what the future holds when it comes to the negotiations, it's quite fuzzy right now from the Hungarian perspective. Again, as I said, it's not really the most politicized issue in Hungary. But what was very interesting is that during the campaign, during the referendum campaign, the Hungarian government actually put up an ad in one of the British newspapers stating that the choice is yours, or the decision is yours, but we are stand with you as a member of the European Union. Now, what that means for the future and how this will be interpreted during the negotiations, what kind of position the Hungarian government is going to take in the Brexit negotiations, and what kind of requests it's going to make vis-à-vis the other European partners, I think that's still an open question. So far, just
Thank you very much.
briefly.
Natasza, over to you.
Okay, that works. Okay, seems to me that there are some similarities, obviously, between Hungary and Poland, but let me start from saying that generally all European issues are perceived in Poland through the lens of the domestic politics, yeah, and Brexit is not any exception here. Yeah? So Brexit was not debated before the referendum too much if it was debated just in context of how effective Donald Tusk is. Pursuing British people not to have a referendum. Yeah? So this is the biggest, I think, difference between Poland and Hungary. But what is similar is that there is no discussion in details about how negotiations should look like, about the second phase, about anything like special. What we talk about, and I think this is still visible, is that with Brexit, Poland lost the best ally in European Union when it comes to contesting EU institutions, but also when it comes to the vision of future European integration. So British were always kind of in favor of looser integration, not deeper political integration, and the Polish current government is definitely not in favor of deeper political integration. So this is the first point. The second is, of course, economic. So first of all, Poland is the biggest beneficiary of EU funds. UK is the biggest net payer, right? So obviously what Polish government is claiming is that we need to keep UK paying to the EU budget as long as possible, and not shorter than till the end of a current financial perspective, so till 2020, which is quite a long time. And the second thing here is also the fact that Britain is actually the second most important trading partner for Poland. So it's around 7% of Polish exports that goes to UK. And that, of course, brings concerns about how it will look like after Brexit. And the last, but definitely not least, and probably the most discussed in Polish media is the issue of Polish people living in the UK. And that's an issue everywhere, but in terms of Polish people living in UK, we speak about around 1 million people living, studying, working here. And this is quite a significant number, even though we are 38 million country. And as far as we are concerned, all the discussions between the Polish government and the British government, all the visits that happened, all the calls were about this issue, so securing the rights of Polish people living in the UK. That's the priority of the Polish government. And as far as I'm concerned, it's that Poland is open to any negotiations, to transition periods, to whatever needed, as long as rights of Polish people are secured. Yeah? How to do it, that's the other story, and this is something we are not aware of, even though there is a strategy that our government implements now, but it's not open to public, so we will just see the results. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you. The Czech Republic is not a is not a difficult story. It's quite simple and short, so it will give us some time and space for discussion, as we will save some time. The first thing to start with is a point which you have heard. So the whole issue of Brexit is not as salient in the Czech daily politics, so it is quite hardly surprising. And it is caused by two reasons. The first one is the general low salience of European Union issues in the Czech politics. The second one is that the needs and demands which the Czech Republic wants from the Brexit negotiations are broadly shared and supported by a majority of the Czech parties. So, for example, in February of this year, we have a deal which was signed by the parties and which means that they support the needs and demands of the Czech governments. The second finding is that, despite of having said that the whole issue of Brexit is of a low saliency, it does not mean that something is not happening. And it's the way the parties are using this Brexit narrative for reformulating their European policy. So far we have there three different groups. The first one, it wants to use the whole issue in a way to reform the European integration and in a way to become it more deeper and more centralized. It's for example, Social Democrats or Christian Democrats. The second group wants to reform the European integration as well, but in a different way, and it's toward a more flexibility and toward some sort of differentiation. It's, for example, Mr. Babiš, who is going to be probably the new Czech Prime Minister. And the third one, it wants simply to use Brexit for destroying the European Union, and it is especially the far right. Which leads me to the third and final point. As you probably know, we have a general election in the Czech Republic. It's today and tomorrow. So depending on the results of these elections, and please do not ask me on the results, because at the moment really nobody knows, and it is very difficult to just to give you some prediction. But depending on the result, the whole Czech EU policy may be different. But the approach towards Brexit will probably remain the same.